Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making time to be with us today. This meeting is taking place on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional gathering place of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Every time we acknowledge this truth, we have an invitation and an opportunity to reflect on what we do and what we can do to make Manitoba a better place for everyone who lives here. Thank you for being considerate and mindful of our true history. I invite you all now to take a moment to arrive, close your eyes or lower your gaze, and take 3 deep breaths. Take this time to bring your full attention to this meeting and your colleagues. Okay, thank you, everyone. So the COVID-19 pandemic has been an unbelievable journey, one filled with uncertainty, fear, frustration, sadness, and also some amazing ingenuity, creativity, and learning. When I take time to pause and think about the past 2 years, it actually amazes me how connected, collaborative, and compassionate everyone has been. The themes that keep coming forward and that stay with me and will stay with me are staff offering to work overtime and cover shifts when staffing was at risk, even offering to live with the people who were COVID positive. Staff coming up with ideas to keep people safe and stay busy and fulfilled. Our community thinking of ways to show appreciation to one another and to share our gratitude, and just the overall kindness when it would have been very easy to show frustration. So we all know the pandemic is not over. And on the contrary, we are seeing staff and people we support testing positive every day. But we are learning to live with this new reality, and we are starting to slowly get back to some of our pre-pandemic activities. This will happen at a different pace for everyone, and will come with lots of different emotions, but it is an important step in recovery. We can't binge Netflix forever. We need to get excited about seeing people again and returning to the things that bring us true joy. So Carrie Walters is going to walk us through an exercise to help us think about our own goals and to also help us think about how to have these conversations with the people we support. Carrie, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. Thank you, John. I am hoping I have access to share my screen. So bear with me for 1 second here. That worked. I think it worked. John, I can see you on my screen. Can you see it? The slideshow?
I can. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we had a chance in the last little while. We've been talking to the executive at the Health and Wellness Committee a little bit about self-care. And we had a chance last week at the leaders group to go over this little activity. And so some of you may have had the chance to do this. So I invite you to reflect on how your goals are going and how things are going with your self-care, your new self-care goals. I'll share a little bit about mine while we're doing an activity after, and then we're going to open up an activity for you guys to share some of your ideas and your goals once we get to the other side of this. So there's this really cool little grid that you can see up on my screen here and on your screens now. Dr. Joanne Unger is the president of the Manitoba Psychological Society, and she did a talk during Psychology Month, and I understand she also did a talk through our Beyond Limits conference series, I believe recently, for staff at St.Amant, and was talking about stress management and self-care and just kind of how to take care of ourselves. And so I kind of saw an opportunity where this all fit together nicely, and we had the chance to do this exercise. And so I'm hoping you can walk through it with me, and then maybe think about some ways in which you want to move forward. We've all kind of been in this really bitterly cold and snowy winter, and now the rain and all of the things that have been going on with the weather that have kind of kept us indoors. And then, of course, the pandemic, which I know, John, you were just talking about all of the impact that that's had on us and the people that we support. And so I hope that you can find some inspiration here to maybe think about some of the habits that maybe you developed during the last little while that maybe you want to shed, and maybe think about some things you'd like to do to replace some of those habits as we enter into hopefully spring. And I said this last weekend right before the rain came, and here I am again. And I'm hoping that this Colorado low stays south of the border, like they're saying that it might. So I'll launch into this right now, and then we'll spend some time hearing about what you guys have for your goals or what you guys want to work on. So the first question that Dr. Unger encouraged us to think about during the activity that she walked us through was who benefits from us being recharged and charging our batteries. So she was trying to get us to think a little bit about the value and the importance of recharging ourselves and re-energizing. And what she was talking about was, let's start by thinking about us and some of the people that are important to us and who would benefit from us recharging our own batteries or spending some time dedicated to ourselves. And so, of course, we should be on the list as a priority ourselves. But then you start thinking about, and I started thinking about my family and my friends and the people that are important to me, that if I have more energy in my life and more time and I'm a better version maybe of myself than the exhausted, burnt out version of myself, there are lots of people who would probably benefit from me having more energy and being recharged. And then the next thing that she encouraged us to do was to think a little bit about what kinds of thoughts and beliefs, internal thoughts and beliefs that might be getting in the way of our self-care. And for me, interestingly, it kind of overlapped here. There was a lot of sort of guilt of, well, all the people who happen to be in that bottom right corner were all the reasons why I sometimes am not taking time for myself. So I'm trying to be a parent. I'm trying to, do all of the things that are happening in my life, be at work, sort of disconnect from work and do the things that are happening in my personal life with my family and friends. And so it's like this competing battle for me of trying to do things for myself to recharge, but then feeling guilty or feeling like I'm not doing all the other things that I maybe should have been doing. So yeah, Dr. Unger wanted us to just think about and talk, like write down for ourselves what kinds of things might be getting in the way or what kinds of feelings are preventing us from prioritizing ourselves and making time for ourselves to recharge. So now we get into some of the action items. And so the next thing that she asked us to reflect on is what are the things that we're doing that are keeping us from recharging? And so this was where I kind of linked some of the dots between what have we been doing during the pandemic or during the winter, like things like spending time, maybe people are spending time on social media. I have become far too invested in some Netflix series that I have spent long days sitting on the couch saying, okay, after this one, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go and do something different. And then I don't, because the next one comes on 15 seconds later and I just can't not watch that. So I feel like that's kind of a common theme. And we talked a little bit about that and we're laughing about that a little bit. It's the reality, right? There's lots of things that we kind of get sunk into that just sort of are not really getting us up, getting us moving and doing those things that make us feel great. But it's kind of become part of our routine or our habit to pass time, or if we're in isolation or locked down, it's our reality right now. So thinking about some of the things that we're doing instead of recharging then becomes some of the things that go on the list of maybe some of the things that we could do a little less of when we're thinking about some of those things that actually do get us recharged. So the last thing that we were invited to do is to think about and write down some of the activities that actually are recharging and re-energizing for us. And so things like maybe getting out in nature when the sun is shining, those things are hard to imagine doing. And it's been hard to do those things in the winter time and during the lockdown periods. Things like, connecting with friends, going for dinner with friends. You might not have been able to do that. And it might still be hard for you to do those things. You might not quite be there yet. And so some of the things that might go on this, what activities are recharging for us list, might not be real for us right now. They might be kind of the next stage or a little bit down the road for us. And so yeah, this process, I found it to be extremely helpful just to sort of give me a little bit of a boost and a nudge to think about what have I been doing too much of that I maybe shouldn't do much more of. What would I like to do if I realistically could incorporate some of these things back into my life? And then, yeah, really just sort of thinking about, for me, who could benefit from that? Because it sometimes feels selfish to take time for ourselves. But realistically, when you look at that bottom corner, you start to see that it's actually somewhat selfless if we can recharge our batteries and be there in a more present and more engaged way for the people that we're worried about not being there for in these situations. So that was the activity that I wanted to share. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about goal setting. So the other thing that Dr. Unger talked a little bit about was just when you're thinking about setting a goal. So she wanted us to think about picking one thing out of that top right corner and think about how might we do a little bit more of that. So she just talked a little bit about how do we set goals and make them real, make them not super overwhelming. Sometimes we can take on way more than we have time for, and then it just becomes unmanageable or not something we can really maintain over time. So she talked about keeping them specific. So when might you do it? Where would you do this? How long? How often? So I'll share a little bit about how my goal is going in a bit. But for me, it is meditation. I wanted to try and bring meditation back into my daily routine. So I tried to pick a place in my house that I know is quiet, where the cats can't jump on me necessarily while I'm trying to have a mindful moment, and picked a time when everybody was still asleep early in the morning so I could have some peace and quiet to myself. And then I have a bit of a dedicated space where I know that's kind of my place to go, where I know I can do my meditation. And I just started with a small, like 5 minutes a day, because I know 20 minutes is not reasonable right now. I'm not going to get there. And then keeping it measurable. So keeping notes in a journal, she suggested checking to see with yourself, are you on track? Are you working in the right direction? Do you maybe want to carve out a little bit more time, a little bit of a different time of the day so that you can fit this in? Making it achievable. Is it realistic? So can you actually make it happen? So like I said, if I started with 20 minutes, I know there's no way it's going to happen every day. So I started small. And sometimes we start at 5 minutes and realize 2 minutes is a better goal. So she just encouraged us to keep it realistic, see if we can make it happen, and think a little bit about any barriers that might be in the way from us achieving that. So that's where I would look to that top left corner. Some of the things that I'm doing too much of, maybe I could end at that third episode of Netflix and maybe just do a quick 2 minute meditation instead or something, right? Just to sort of free up that time that I might think I don't have in my schedule. Is it relevant? Is it something that's important to me, aligned with my goals? Is it going to be fun? Because if it's just a bit of a downer again, I might not prioritize it if it's something that's an obligation or something that just feels like more work and more stress for me to have to pile into my busy life. And then she just encouraged us, try it out for a couple of weeks, see how it's going. Don't lock into a New Year's resolution and make it a lifelong commitment if it's something that, you don't even know if you're really going to enjoy doing it. So she just encouraged, pick a couple of weeks, reassess, see how it's going. And then, yes, just some little tips where what could you eliminate to make it work? She encouraged us to put it in the calendar so that we could see it's a priority and it's important to us. And that way it's kind of carved out and nobody else can necessarily book that time away from us. And then take another look in a couple of weeks, see if it's still a priority. So I'm hoping for those of us who started this last week when we did it at the leaders group, that maybe people can have had a chance to kind of reflect on how that's been going for them. And I am going to, I think, so we're going to move to Menti, I believe it's called, and I have Mel Forbes is going to give me a hand, I think, with getting everything set up. So I'm going to give a couple of instructions, and I might need Mel to give me a hand because I am not the tech person here, but we're going to create a word cloud. And so we're going to invite you, I'm going to get you to open a new browser. I'm going to get out of this screen here, stop sharing, and then I'm going to invite each of you to open a new browser through your email through your web browser. And I'll give you a minute to do that. And when you get a new browser open, you're going to go to www.menti.com. And there's a code you can probably see here on the screen share that you can, from Mel's screen, it's 17929609. And you're going to type that into when you get to the menti.com page, and it will take you to a space where you can start typing in some words. And so I don't know, Mel, are you able to unmute and just make sure that I'm giving all the right instructions here? Because I'm not super familiar with Menti.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is all perfect. I also put a link in the chat. So if it's easier to just click the link, you can do that too. And if anyone's having trouble opening it or finding it, maybe let me know in the chat and I can help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mel. And so I'm encouraging people, if you have kind of 2 or 3 words to put into, oh, the code Kara is asking for, it's 17929609, and it's just on the top of the screen here. And I think Mel put it in the chat again as well. So I'm going to leave, Mel, if you wouldn't mind. Here we go. People are starting to populate. If you want to just take a look at the chat, I'll just invite you to maybe help out the folks that are struggling a little bit with getting onto the site. So yeah, if you want to share a couple of words just to capture the goal that you're thinking you'd like to do a little bit more of. And if you see something on here and you want to retype the exact one, you're going to see some of the ones that become more and more popular, or people are thinking about doing those things. We're going to see them become bigger and bigger. And I'm kind of looking forward to it because I know our Health and Wellness Committee, which I have the opportunity to sit on and participate on. We always are looking for themes for blog posts and ways to just respond to the needs and the interests of the organization and to staff. So as we see those come up, we might have a really nice idea, and we can maybe share this in our blog post after, and maybe we can provide some suggestions or focus on some topics that relate to this. So I think this is probably go on for another minute or so. And I don't know, John, do you want to share a little bit about your goal? I had shared about my meditation one, and I know I'm working on it. It's not perfect, but I'm kind of keeping tabs on it. The other day I brought my daughter to a piano lesson and I hadn't had a chance to meditate. And so I tried to I didn't want to close my eyes because I was sitting in my car by myself, but I did the best I could to try and squeeze in a little meditation while I was sitting there. So I'm trying to get creative and be flexible. But how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Like I'm a morning person, so I exercise in the morning, I meditate in the morning, and then but when I come home from work, I was finding that I was watching a lot of not just Netflix, but Crave and Disney and Prime, and to the point where I was a bit of a slug. So when we went through this exercise, I immediately knew what I wanted to do, and that was I need to get outside. And I talked about my dogs earlier on. They need to be walked more frequently, and so I made a commitment to walk them 30 minutes. What made it a lot easier, I'll say, is when the weather changed after our leaders group meeting, I was able to get out a couple times and do that. So that has been my answer: is more fresh air, more walking. And my goal I set at 30 minutes because we used to walk longer. So I thought I'll set us a bit shorter than
Smart.
we used to do an hour and a half. So yeah. So thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I know one of the people in my group last week was sharing that they were going to put their phone down a little bit more. And I was super happy to hear that. And I was inspired by it. It's something that I think is a big priority for me, for just not scrolling the news. And it's kind of sad sometimes, I go and I look and see what's new on the news, and it kind of brings me down, but it's become a bit of a habit where it's like, what's going on? What's happening in the news? And so I was really inspired by that too. And so that's kind of, once I'm able to kickstart my next goal, that's the priority for me. So thank you to the person who knows who they are, who were in my group last week and shared that idea. I thought that was awesome. So this is coming together so nicely, and maybe I'll stop here. And I think that's good for this activity. And I hope people found some inspiration. I'm super excited. I'm going to read through this after and see. It looks so cool the way it's coming together. So we will include it in a blog, I think, and see what we can do with it for the next health and wellness post. So thank you so much. And thank you, Mel and Laura, for all of your support with the technology behind that. That was great.
Carrie, thank you so much for taking us through that exercise. Some real kind of deliberate time for us to focus on what we can change. So thanks again. So we've had some questions from staff and from families about whether we're going to continue to require COVID-19 vaccination for staff. And just so everybody's clear, the answer right now is yes. So just like we have other vaccinations, we've added COVID-19 to that employment requirement. We agreed to review the PPE requirements again in mid-May. And given the rate of COVID-19 right now in staff and also in people we support, I'm really actually quite glad that we didn't make the changes at the time that government indicated we could. So given the population of people we serve and our staff safety and well-being, we want to be cautious. So I just want to pause here for a minute. Anybody have any questions about our pandemic response at this point? I'll invite you to put your questions in the chat. And then Jen, if you could just let me know if we have any pandemic specific questions.
So far, nothing has come up.
Okay. All right. Do you want to just wait a minute or should we go in?
Sure, yeah, and people can raise their hand too if you'd prefer to ask a question. So you can do either or. You can raise your hand with the raise hand function under reactions, or you can pop questions into the chat today. Nope, nothing coming through, John.
Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk a little bit about the engagement survey that we did last fall, if you remember. And we did it in the kind of the height of the COVID-19 Delta wave. We asked staff to participate in what was the WRHA engagement survey. We had less participation than last year, which we kind of expected as everyone was consumed with managing the COVID outbreaks. What we didn't expect was to see a slight rise in our engagement score. Our overall engagement score as an organization is actually 72.4%, which is up about 1%. However, we actually really expected that in the middle of a pandemic, our score would have dropped. So now each manager and director has received results for your particular area, and we'll be sharing some information with you and talking about what your area can do to improve the experience for your team. But today I just want to speak about our overall score and where we did well and where there is definite room for improvement. So where we scored very high was on physical safety, on providing a culture of diversity and inclusion, and on psychological safety and mental health. Where we scored lower was on continuous quality improvement, opportunities for advancement, and total compensation. So these are the areas that as an organization we'll need to begin to plan around, and we will be coming back to you with information as we move those plans forward. On the topic of total compensation, one of our strategies has been to be actively involved and to be supporting the advocacy efforts of the disability sector as a whole, and to move forward on wages for support workers. At the government announcement yesterday, I don't know if you saw it on TV or in the free press or elsewhere, but the government announced that they were going to inject $10 million of new money into frontline wages. So now our organization has historically paid better than most organizations because of the way our contracts have been negotiated. So this isn't going to have a huge impact on our frontline wages. However, I do want to stress that I think this is a really big win for us and for the sector. It signals that government is acknowledging that there is an issue and that they agree that wages are not representative of the skill and quality of care. And for us, I think that is a big win. In the Minister of Family speech, she said that this is the first step and that they know there's more that needs to be done, and they will work with the sector to plan in coming months. So this is the first new money that we've seen for wages in 20 years. So I want to send out a huge kudo to Margot from Abilities. That's the Coalition of Service Providers that St.Amant's a member of, to the Disability Matters Vote people. And those are the folks that come together before every election to make sure that all of our elected officials have disability front and center, and that they understand the importance of the issues to our sector and to the people we support. And so I want to say a thank you to all of you who have worked hard advocating and sharing stories and showing up, because this new money, it really does make a difference. Now, before we leave the topic of surveys, I want to share that the diversity and inclusion survey closed, and we looked at the results as a whole. Of the almost 2,000 staff here at St.Amant, about 350 people completed the survey. So it's hard to know how representative the information is. We are going to do some additional work to look at the results from the lens of the underrepresented groups that filled out the survey. And as soon as we have the survey data compiled in that way, we'll share the results on the intranet. So in the meantime, we know that there is work to do to make our organization safe, welcoming, and inclusive. We are in the process of hiring a diversity and inclusion consultant to help us build a plan and a roadmap that will get us to where we need to go. We're also developing a leadership stream for underrepresented groups that project team will be sending out a call for people to help develop the program in the next few weeks. Just going to pause here and ask, are there any questions on either the engagement survey or the diversity and inclusion surveys?
And again, you can raise your hand or you can pop anything into the chat. I'm not seeing any questions, John.
Okay, so our next topic is the designation change that impacts health and transition services. So I'd like to call on Sarah Mankalo to talk about the designation change and how it impacts HTS.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. So for some of you, you've heard this information before. I did share it in the HTS staff town hall, as well as in the leaders town hall. And I go into it in much more detail in the HTS town hall, and that recording is available on the intranet. So if you don't feel like you have all the information after this shorter presentation, then feel free to reach out to me or find that recording on the intranet. So this change has been a work in progress for many years. So I think more than 10 years, there's been efforts made to change the designation of health and transition services from a developmental center to a health facility. And so we received confirmation of this change just before Christmas. So it came kind of as a bit of a surprise near the end of the year, but we were very excited to receive the confirmation. And it did come into effect on January 1st, 2022. And as John mentioned, although it references St.Amant, the impact of this change is really within HNTS. So to just give a bit more context, this change is the final legislative piece that's put in place to help establish or make sure we're establishing HNTS as a short-term healthcare facility for children and adults with intellectual and developmental disability. I think some of the feedback I was hearing through my discussions with staff are like, I don't get it. What's the big deal here? We're already doing this work. And so some of you might also be asking yourself, well, what's the big deal? You know, I thought HTS had already been transitioning people into the community and accepting shorter term admissions. And you're correct. So, HNTS has been actively moving away from a developmental model of care for more than 10 years. Right now, we are continuing to refine our admission and discharge processes and really making sure that we're serving people who require 24/7 kind of nursing or medical care or have behavioral support needs that require intense levels of stabilization support. So really the big deal part of this change is that there's now legislation in place to strengthen our escalation and advocacy efforts when the people we support are faced with barriers to discharge. And we know there's many barriers out there. The big deal is that there's now heightened awareness and confirmation amongst staff, families, our external partners, that HTS is not a place for people to live their entire lives. One example of this recognition is there has been a recent addition of a CLDS hospital liaison worker, and part of their role is to also focus on helping people move out of HNTS. So that's a really good example of some increased awareness of this change. And the really big deal is that there's now an increased emphasis on the fundamental human rights of people with disabilities to live full and inclusive lives in the community. And this change and this increased emphasis aligns with what the disability community has been advocating for years. People do not belong in institutions. Another big deal is the fact that St.Amant will continue to be in control of operating an innovative service that meets the needs of the community we serve and also looks to meet other unmet needs out there. The alternative to that is really clear, right? We know that MDC right now, or Manitoba Developmental Center, is the last standing developmental center in Manitoba, and it's on its way to closure. And finally, this change in legislation also means that families no longer need to pursue a court order for their loved ones to be admitted into HNTS. And although this is a positive change, as that court order was a barrier to admission at times, it does also highlight the need for us to have some safeguards in place to ensure that we're not unintentionally institutionalizing people. And that's where we're really focusing on our admission process and our eligibility criteria, and the way we structure our discharge planning. So we know that there's still a lot of work to do. We're all really excited to continue on the path of transitioning people into the community. And just to flag it for folks and share it with folks, to date, more than 75 people have been successfully transitioned into community living situations. So that's 75 people who are out there living within the community, engaging in the activities that they love, the activities that most of us love to do as well. We are developing a plan to support the remaining folks who were admitted under the designation of developmental center to do the same. And there will be more information shared as those plans evolve. And finally, I do want to just highlight Todd McDonald's role in leading a lot of the work around admission, discharge, and other flow-related processes. Todd's role was adjusted last summer, so the summer of 2021, to really focus on this important work and work with many of you because it involves people within HTS, the clinical services team, CRP, CS. It's kind of a real big team effort. So I'm really grateful to Todd, and I'm really grateful to the entire HTS leadership team for all of their efforts and commitment to this work. I also want to just say and highlight that the COVID-19 pandemic has really shone a light on the impacts that large-scale congregate living has on the health, the well-being, and the human rights of the people we support. And I know in this current wave, we're feeling that more than ever. And just to say that the entire team is committed to this continued journey away from that congregate kind of institutional model of care. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them. And also, as mentioned, I go into this in a bit more detail in the HTS town hall, as well as there's some discussion about, okay, well, what happens next? Because that might be a question that's on your minds as well.
I'm just pausing for questions. Yeah, no questions?
Yeah. Nope.
Okay, so thanks so much, Sarah. And while Sarah was talking, she mentioned Manitoba Developmental Center in its slated closure. I just wanted to mention that St.Amant has offered to help transition a number of the people from MDC to community. And we've offered to support up to 12 people in through our community residential program and up to 6 people through the home share option in the community services area. We will be hearing over the next few weeks whether or not they're going to take us up on all of those, and that will depend somewhat on how many other agencies are interested in supporting people move from MDC to community. So we'll have some more information in the next little while. I just want to share a few other organizational updates. One on the stabilization renovation. So the stabilization renovation is on track. The project is a $4 million renovation that is preparing us to support people who need specialized stabilization support in an environment that is both safe and dignified. This area of support is unique to St.Amant and can mean the difference of having to stay in hospital or in a possible worse environment for lack of any suitable space and access to specialized help. So it is really a critical need that we are serving. The work of the stabilization team in HTS is life-changing, and I'm very grateful to see that this renovation is well on its way and actually on track. So a huge shout out to the St.Amant Foundation, as all of the $4 million for this renovation is from fundraised dollars. And also on that note, the foundation announced that it raised $2.4 million last year. That's actually a $500,000 more than the previous year. And some of the money went to hosting 400 people in virtual events, purchasing 30 communication devices, 70 different kinds of recreation equipment, and 60 personal items for people, including mobility equipment. So I just want to have, and I hope you join me in a big shout out to Juliet and the foundation team, and actually to all of you who are donors. The foundation work makes a very huge difference in the quality of life for everyone that we support. So switching topics a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the large increase in referrals that we're seeing for the early learning autism program. We aren't actually totally sure why this is happening, whether it's more people are being diagnosed overall, or whether there's more families who are choosing our services. And we think it's probably a combination of both. We're also receiving more calls for support from schools, both to our St.Amant school for referrals and also through the autism programs for our consultative model. That's where we go out and consult to kids in schools. Our partnership with the childcare sector on training has been very successful, and we're actively talking to government about funding needs in the autism program and for those psychology, behavioral training and training supports for schools. So I'm going to move on to our strategic updates for our organization now. From my perspective, it feels good to have strategic projects on the agenda today. During the pandemic, there wasn't much time to work on strategic projects. And for a lot of us, this can be truly motivating work and is exciting work. So just as a reminder, or for anyone who is new to St.Amant, each year the executive team puts forward a list of projects that will move the strategic plan forward. This is how the work of our strategic plan gets accomplished. This year, we have about 14 strategic projects in total. Now, even though most of our strategic work was put on hold through the pandemic, we still managed to accomplish some of the goals. For instance, the Meaningful Connections training and Starfire collaboration went forward. There were some starts and stops, but the learning from Starfire has been very important. In fact, it's led to an ongoing partnership with their organization. We're also preparing to launch a new website for St.Amant this summer. This site will meet both the accessibility and bilingual guidelines, and will have a more current and up-to-date kind of look. We've accomplished a ton of work in Gold Care. It was mostly by clinical services, which will now serve as a model for the other programs as this project continues to move forward. We opened one children's respite home in Winnipeg and another opening in Brandon very soon. We continue to move people from health and transition services to the community throughout the pandemic. So you're probably curious, what's in the plan for next year? Under the priority of innovation, we have some exciting plans. The first is to build 3 purpose-built homes on our property on River Road in the field across from Action Marguerite. These homes will not be necessarily your typical community home, but will give us the opportunity to try serving people in a different way, and also give us the option to kind of partner with others, maybe even outside of the disability sector. We'll also be looking at the continuum of respite, because we have respite that we offer from HTS, and we have respite in our new community home model. And we know that there are still some gaps out there. So this will be informed by a pilot project, and the needs will really be identified by the families that we're talking to. Under the quality of life priority, we have the continuation of the Meaningful Connections project. We'll be looking forward to exploring pairs, and that's a pair being a staff member and someone that we support, and to get out in the community and to make some new connections. We've been providing lots of training to staff about that. Our work in reconciliation also falls under this priority of quality of life. And the board actually is in the process right now of looking at a plan that the executive team put forward to them. Under advocacy, we will be working to create a culture of advocacy within our organization. I think that's already well started. We've done lots of work. I've enjoyed being a part of a lot of that advocacy work. Last year, we developed training and are putting the final touches on a tool. And this year, we'll dig into embedding advocacy into our culture. We'll also want to support our families to be confident, competent advocates. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have a project that will help us ensure people that we're supporting are receiving the right level of service and exploring service options. Under the communication priority, we know that connecting with our frontline staff, given the multitude of locations that we provide service through, it is a real challenge at times with approaching, like you mentioned earlier, almost 2,000 staff. So this year we are looking at a new kind of digital solution that will make it easier and actually will reward staff who engage through the solution. So stay tuned on that one. Under workforce development, we have work to do in both diversity and inclusion and French language services. And last but not least, under the priority of capacity building, we will be looking at the needs that continue to be identified by schools and the childcare community for more support. We'll explore how we can share our training to a wider audience that has expressed interest, and we'll also look at bringing planning and evaluation in-house. We hear so many positive comments about the training videos that we offer to parents. We hear, and we take some of this for granted, all of the training that we offer our leaders and our staff who are direct service workers. There's lots of other organizations out there that don't offer that training. So we're really hoping to be a help and to partner with some of those agencies and organizations. So this is not an exhaustive list, and nor is it a detailed explanation of all of the projects, but it just gives you a flavor for where we're going and what projects you might be asked to support. This is our strategic vision coming to life. So at the planning day that we had, many of us felt very energized, kind of focusing on the work, on this work, and hoping that it all also brings you some hope and optimism that we can get back to our core work and that the projects that we're all really passionate about. So that was a lot of information. We will share the list of projects with more detailed information on the internet soon. Just going to pause here. Any questions that you have on these projects and where we're headed for the next year?
I'm not seeing any questions yet, John, but we did have a couple that came in advance of the town hall.
Sure.
So maybe we could just look at those ones. So there's a question here about Canada's inflation rate, which reached 5.1% this year, which outpaced wage increases of 2.4% over the same period. According to Statistics Canada, this was the first time the annual inflation rate exceeded 5% in more than 30 years. Are you considering a cost of living adjustment for employees?
So it's a great question. It's a complex one, given kind of how our organization fits in the world. We can't make decisions to all of a sudden just go out and start to increase funding, whether it's through salaries or even the rest of our funding model, because we know there's pressure in many different areas related to inflation. But what I will say is that because we have a large unionized workforce, the unions do for sure take in the cost of living into the discussions that they have, and then we communicate all of that information onto our funders. So I do want to reassure everyone that it's not like we're ignoring inflation. We have inflation. We also have people, I've already referred to them, who we think are underpaid, are some of our direct service staff that we've been strongly advocating on their behalf. So in essence, sometimes inflation kind of strengthens that argument that, you know, our funder needs to pay attention and do more. I mean, yesterday we all went home and saw that our gas bill's going up right by 20% in the next year. So there's lots of indications out there. Sorry, I meant our natural gas, not our gas already went up by 20%, gasoline. So yeah, there's lots of pressure. That's part of our job as leaders, is to make sure that that gets communicated to our funders and that we continue to put pressure. It's also part of our board's job. They were asking us about cost of living and inflation recently, Shirley and I, and we had a conversation with them about that. So I hope that provides you some reassurance that we are doing some work in that area.
There was a couple of questions that came in about the leaking canopy over the front entrance. Do you know if there's a plan to fix that?
Yeah, yes, there is a plan that actually we've already had somebody up. I can tell you that the other day I was one of the people who walked out, and I had my shower in the morning, and then I had another one as I was leaving work because I didn't pay attention. And so I do apologize. It's short-term fixes. We found one of the drains plugged, so we were able to address that. So it shouldn't be as bad. We're trying to redirect some of it away from directly under the door where you're walking. The longer-term answer is we have some significant roof leaks in this building, and we've identified them through the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority safety and security process for getting emergency money. And we do have some emergency money requested for a roof repair. So we're on it. It won't be this week, guaranteed.
One more question on maintenance. The atrium could use a lot of TLC. There's overgrowth. It's hard for the sun to come in. Is there any plan to have someone come in to maintain the atrium?
This has come up a couple of times, both in this question and in our suggestion box. It came up because I remember Jen and I were talking about it. So we are going to look at the atrium and ensure that there is better attention and care to that area. So we hear you.
And that's all I've got for questions, John.
Okay. All right. So I'll move on. Thanks, Jen. So we've been talking a little bit about where we're headed, and I'm sure you all know that I'm retiring in June. That was an announcement that came out a few months ago. So I am looking forward to the new chapter in my life and being able to kind of prioritize my life differently. It is kind of weird and hard to imagine leaving. Most days I just kind of get up, come to work, or do my work and do as you do, and try not to think about it too much because I'm not sure, what I'm doing yet. So I said before, and this remains true, that my 10 years here at St.Amant has been the best job that I've had in my career so far. And I always share at Corporate O that even on my worst days, even on those days where I felt like it's been a struggle, I can go home at the end of the day and feel purpose in my work. And I hope that that's a shared experience with all of you. So I will miss that. I will miss working with all of you. I am so impressed with everything that we've accomplished during the 10 years that I've been with the organization. And it's a result of your creativity, your energy, and your drive to make life better for the people that we support. So I really want to thank all of you for embracing our strategic plans, for embracing our values, for working so collaboratively, for having very honest conversations, and for being incredibly passionate about the work that's in front of you. And I think that's been really challenged over the last couple of years. But for me, it's been a really fulfilling journey. So I also just want to let you know that the board is in the process of hiring right now, and I would expect within the next 3 to 4 weeks, there should be more information on my replacement. And then the plan is I'm hoping to have a little bit of overlap with the new CEO. So that's where things are at. And now I'm just going to move on to the next item. So we have a couple of stories to share today. The first is a bit of an unplanned, meaningful connection, and I think the video speaks for itself. So if I could just ask for us to cue that up. Thanks.
I came to St.Amant through my beloved and now departed son, Drew. The 3 sons, Jonathan's now 31, and Mackenzie's now 24, and their brother, the second of the 3, he was characterized, never diagnosed, with a degenerative neurological disorder. And at about 20 years of age, he came into care September of 2012 with St.Amant, and prior to that, candidly, I knew very little about St.Amant. And Drew passed, as I mentioned, August of 2013, so that, tragic time. And by September of 2014, I was invited to join St.Amant as a director, and happily did so. Been involved ever since. And shortly after I became involved, I was invited to join the executive committee and later the foundation. And I guess I took over the role as chair of the foundation as of earlier this year. I have a close pal, Pierre Campo. Pierre has coincidentally 3 children, and one of his children has an illness. And not to speak for my pal Pierre, though he has indicated before, as a way of connecting and bonding with his adult child with illness, he started participating in triathlons. We started talking and said, hey, let's put together a triathlon group. So we came up with the idea, hey, let's have a fundraiser. Let's have a triathlon for St.Amant. We had the first one this past June, and it was a great activity with some corporate sponsors and a lot of individual contributions. I think we surprised ourselves in that close to $78,000 was raised for the first triathlon. So I approached my friend Chantel Champagne. I said, hey, I should be doing this event with a service recipient. And I don't know, I can't speak for Chantel. I don't know if she thought of a dozen or 100 people that could participate, but she very quickly came to Jessica. I went and met her at her community residence, where she's supported by St.Amant. I think Jessica must have heard I'm not the best swimmer. So she said, no, I won't swim with you, and the bikes just seemed to be too difficult too, but there was a very generous person in the community who had suffered a loss, donated their I want to say oversized stroller to Jessica so that she could be seated and we could actually do the run portion.
I like the crack with a really good fun point.
So Jessica and I, you connect really well with some people and not so well with others, and we really connected. She's just a great spirit, and it's just really great spending time with her. So she permitted me to spend time with her, and I didn't have to necessarily run. And we just started spending some time together. So I would say on average once a week, we spend some time and we'd tour around her neighborhood. We've been building crafts together as of late. And I can honestly tell you that probably one of the more enriching experiences from the summer of 2021 was hanging out with Jessica.
I can basically talk about anything now. My favorite thing about fun hashtag is the fun. Have a really good friend. And I like it when he thinks he's done.
So I think that's got to be one of the primary goals for St.Amant. Yeah, all fine and good. We're going to raise money for people so that their quality of life is improved. But I'm of the firm belief that money in and of itself won't do it. But meaningful relationships, that'll help.
I got to know Craig, and as it said there, he's now the chair of our foundation, but he's also on our St. Amant board too, and he's on the executive. And when he talked about meaningful connections, when he learned about what we were doing and why we were trying to find two people who were unpaid, to be involved in every person's life, he can't stop talking about it now. And there's some people here that know that. Like, he called Peter up and he wanted to hear everything that Peter was doing to lead the project. He wanted to talk about it at the foundation, and he wants to make it a priority for the foundation as we move forward. And and then he also said to me, he says, John, at the next board meeting, I think we really need to challenge board members and say, and offer them the opportunity to get involved, to actually get to know someone. And because he says this is just so important work, this is what we really should be focusing on. So, usually we have to work at kind of getting people on board for ideas, and not with Craig. Actually, we can now use Craig to go out and engage, get community more involved. And so I think that video speaks for itself. And I just want to say thank you to him and to Jessica for agreeing to kind of share their story with us today. I actually had an opportunity to meet with Jackie, and I'm just going to actually stop there and let's roll the interview. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Really excited to have Jackie with us today. Jackie's an alpine skier, crafter extraordinaire, and has a real passion for healthy eating and exercise. She's Jackie, you're supported through supported independent living services through St.Amant. Through the pandemic, I know, enjoyed many of the virtual cooking and crafting activities, so much so that you actually offered to host or co-host one of our sessions. How did you get involved in hosting the virtual event for St.Amant?
So, and then they just asked, like, hey, you want to host for the cupcakes or host for the quick classes? Like, yeah, sure, that would be awesome to try it out. So, and then I hosted the cupcakes. So my first time. So I think I did pretty well my first time. So yeah, it was just an easy basic to teach them how to do it. And then it's pretty awesome. And I mentioned to see the cook classes, that would be great, because then they can plan their meals, like
Yeah.
how long it'll last, for a week or more. So I think it'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Were you nervous at all when you were hosting?
not really. No,
Yeah.
it just not really. I wasn't nervous at all. I just showed the basic, a couple tricks, and then that's it. And I think they did pretty well the first time. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like from what I've heard, you did really well.
Yeah.
So did you meet some new people doing this hosting?
Yeah, well, I met couple new people, like we haven't seen for a while, so it was pretty odd to see them. So they would chat with me all the time, so pretty awesome. Yeah, and it keeps them busy. Like I kind of like they do a lot of events, like activities, like parties, and I think it's pretty great they're doing because it keeps them busy.
What was your favorite part of hosting the virtual event?
My favorite one, I really liked the paint night. That was awesome. The paint night.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
awesome. Actually, my favorite one, what we did is the gnome we did on St. Patrick Day. That was awesome. We did it.
So would you recommend that other people should host some of these virtual events?
Sure. Yeah. I think that'd be awesome. Yeah.
What event would you like to host next?
Maybe we could do some craft night or some knitting or crochet or something
Oh, that's a good idea.
anything, just a craft, like anything. So maybe
Yeah.
well, now coming up in the summertime, we could do some plant. Maybe we could do a plant or something, like have a little pot, like plant something. So
Oh, yeah, great idea. Hey, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that the pandemic's been challenging for you. The virtual events were kind of helpful for you, but you also shared with me that you actually worked right through at Tim Hortons, right at your job, right through the whole pandemic. And
yeah,
so how was that? I'm just kind of curious, going to work all the time.
it was we did struggle like a couple times, like when
Yeah.
it hit really hard because like a lot of customers could come in, so it's kind of like it kind of struggled a little bit.
Yeah.
And after that, we kept right through. So we followed our distance, and then we wear face masks. So then I think we did pretty well. So yeah, I never got laid off. So I worked the whole time.
My understanding is you're training with the Special Olympics Alpine Team Canada group. It sounds very exciting.
I'm still training at home, so we're gonna just go where is gonna be our TCAT or competition will be. So in 2 months I'm going to Toronto for a trade camp. So I'm very excited to go see the whole gang. So it'll be fun. Like we haven't traveled for almost 2 years. So and our team are like for the Moose game, they give us 10,000 for our team. So I got a
Oh, right on.
whole big thing.
That's really exciting. You were sharing again earlier that you were supposed to go to Russia, right? For the
Yeah, we're supposed to go Russia. We're supposed to go Russia was last year, but they postponed for a year because with the virus and stuff, and all this Ukraine and stuff. So it's kind of like they shut down the whole game. So they canceled the whole thing. So now we don't know where it's gonna be. So it might be in Canada. We don't know. So we're just waiting for the protocol. But yeah, so hopefully. So,
it sounds like you're a real dedicated athlete, right? In regards to your alpine skiing, and I just want to say to you, the fact that you've continued to train, that's awesome. You've been working right through the pandemic, and then to actually find the extra time and energy to help us out and co-host some of our virtual events, the cupcake decorating. I just want to say on behalf of St.Amant how much I really appreciate all of your hard work, and thank you for kind of agreeing just to come and share a little bit of your story with everybody today at Town Hall.
No, I think St.Amant, they're doing really well to help support like people like disability, because like a lot of stuff is changing. So it was like that like years ago. So it really changed and it make it easier for everybody. Like their help out, like people have problems.
Jackie, just again, a huge thank you.
Yeah.
Great to talk with you today.
So for me, that says it all. There's some feedback for you on how she thinks we did during the pandemic. For me, it's inspirational because I think often we focus on the negative things that came out of the pandemic. Jackie demonstrated that there was some positive for sure in her life. And I think we can all, if we look hard enough, we can find that too. So I think that concludes our town hall for today. Thanks so much for making the time and taking the time to come. Great to see many of you today. I can't see everyone, but hope you have a good rest of your day and a great weekend after tomorrow being Friday. Okay, thanks everyone.